Hi everyone, this is Paul here from the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm doing the astrology report for the Sun's transit through Leo, which starts on the 23rd of July and finishes on the 23rd of August when the Sun moves into Virgo. Apparently the kind of themes this particular month-long transit highlights, along with some key aspects the Sun makes different planets along the way. Before I do that, I just want to clarify, as I always do, that the astrology doesn't control our lives. It gives us a framework to help us understand what's unfolding around us, helps to recognise where the opportunities for growth are and the kind of lessons we can be learning at this time. But from there, it's up to each and every one of us to take responsibility for our own lives, to utilise the information as best we can, making sure it's guided, the way that we implement it is guided by wisdom and not just egoic impulses which will end up creating karma for ourselves. Now, in terms of the Sun's transit through Leo, this is a natural continuation from the Sun's passage through Cancer. So during the Sun's passage through Cancer, ideally one of the key areas we've been looking at is illuminating the psychological base or the subconscious mind and releasing old program that keeps energy stuck in the past rather than operating in the present, which is the only thing that truly exists, as it were. So if we've been doing the work of the Sun in Cancer, then we should find ourselves feeling much more buoyant and light, released from old conditioning based on potentially upbringing, how we were programmed by society we grew up in, and also learning to separate the emotions from the thoughts and recognising that our thoughts or how we think about things isn't necessarily reality at all. We're just recreating the past, but the past no longer exists, it's just in the mind. So with the Sun's passage now through his home sign of Leo, this is a time for kind of embracing creativity, but it's also about figuring out who we are at the authentic level. So it's about that authentic self-expression, and it's about embracing play and creativity and embracing joy and capacity to share emotional warmth, encouragement and generosity with one another. So during the Sun's transit through his home sign of Leo, one of the key areas we need to be looking at is how comfortable are we just being who we are, so expressing ourselves authentically just through our mere presence, as opposed to playing a role and just being an actor in our lives, as opposed to radiating the true self through our presence, as opposed to acting out a role or living behind a mask. And one of the key ways we can kind of gauge which of the two we're doing is if we do cross paths with someone who is being authentic, so the person is just being who they are, they're radiating that warmth, that light of being that comes from being aligned with who we truly are and overcome our programming. Do we feel like it's a cause of celebration? Do we encourage the other person? Do we respect them and celebrate the fact that this person has figured out who they are and they're just being their core self, so they're radiating light? Or do we get insecure about it? Do we feel jealous about what the other person's level of awareness and their capacity to be present and joyful in their lives? And do we then seek to undermine it? Because if it's the latter, then the ego has gotten involved, it's gotten in the way. Because at some level, Leo is about the formation of a healthy ego, so it's a personal self that isn't heavily conditioned by the past, because the ego in some respects enables us to interact with the world around us, but at the same time we need to understand that that is not who we are. It's just something that allows us to interact with the world around us, to play a part within it and enjoy the creation as a whole, but that's not who we are. And if we make the mistake of believing we are who we think we are, then we end up living behind a mask, and we go from being a being, if you like, or being consciousness, which is our true form, to just being another actor in the world, someone who's acting out a role, acting on their own past conditioning, and doing things that they think will bring kind of validation or support from other people. But at the higher level of Leo, it's about that capacity to just be our authentic self, to radiate love, radiate compassion, and radiate that emotional warmth that is encouraging, and just being in that kind of presence naturally uplifts you. It's not kind of intervening in people's lives, it's not telling them what they should be doing or trying to play saviour. It's by virtue of being who we are and being an example of what it's like when someone's light is radiating from them. They're not pretending to be anything other than who they are, feeling completely comfortable in their own skins and happy to just be without worrying about the roles that they play in life. That kind of energy that's flowing from the true self is naturally uplifting, and if we're not insecure about that, then we feel that natural hit of energy from people who are authentic. But obviously, if for whatever reason we're still insecure, we're still tied to the ego or tied to the false self, then when we do encounter someone who has done the work of freeing themselves from past conditioning and learning to be who they are without worrying about other people's validation, as it were, then if we are insecure, then the ego will flare up, and we'll probably have those kinds of thoughts about how dare that person do that, and make us feel small, as it were. But we'd only be thinking that if we're operating from the ego in the first place. If we're operating from our true self, then seeing someone else who is also being true to who they are, being the authentic self and radiating that loving energy that comes from being, that can only really flow for being authentic, then we acknowledge it and we celebrate that person reaching that level as well. So if we're being authentic, then seeing other people attain the same level is something that we celebrate. It's a cause for celebration, it's a cause for joy, and it allows us to kind of embrace this sheer joy of simply being. And one way to think about it is, if you ever on a summer's day just standing under the sun and just feeling the warmth flowing, radiating down upon us, and feeling that warmth penetrating to us, and just feel like your heart opens, you feel a gratitude for life. This is the kind of thing we need to be kind of striving for in general. This is the kind of lesson from Leo. It's the capacity to enjoy creation. It's the capacity to co-create with life. So by being true to who we are, so being our true self and working with the creative power itself, because at the end of the day, creativity isn't ours to own. It's a creative force that flows from spirit, radiates through us, but can only truly reach its full capacity or its full potential if we actually let go of the need to have validation from other people, have other people's approval, so just letting go of people pleasing. And it's also, if people don't recognise us or don't acknowledge us, we don't feel offended or hurt by it. It's about, if the person doesn't recognise us, that's fine. We're perfectly comfortable being our true self, of radiating love and light. If other people don't recognise it, that's fine. That's just the level of perception they're operating from, and it's nothing to take personally. At the end of the day, none of us, if we're taking things personally, we're operating from the ego, not the true self anyway, and it's only the ego that can really take offence at anything. The true self is based in love and truth, and if we're operating from that place, then it doesn't really bother us how other people perceive us, because we recognise that that person sees us from their own level of perception. But if we do encounter the people who are have reached that point where they're authentic, they know who they are, and they radiate, when that energy kind of naturally multiplies, the light comes together, and it's more powerful than if we're doing things on an individual basis. So it's a capacity to share our light with other people, share our love with others, and recognise that doing that doesn't diminish us in any way. If anything, it adds to the light. It allows us to shine even brighter, because we're now sharing our light together. We're sharing that emotional warmth, that love of self and love of each other. Because when we love ourselves and love one another, there's no place for that kind of pettiness. There's no place for ego to undermine the process, and we just embrace the joy of being, embrace the joy of creativity without worrying about how other people see it. Because it's when we can embrace that creative spirit and allow it to flow through us unencumbered that we can co-create, that we can work with the divine plan, if you like, or work with divine timing and create in alignment with God's vision of the world or the universal plan, whatever you feel most comfortable with. So the task for us all during the Sun's transit through Leo is to remember to just be present and be, to let go of these masks that we habitually wear in order to fit in or gain social approval, to remember to love ourselves unconditionally and love one another. And it's about embracing that creativity, embracing play, because play is a fundamental task or fundamental activity that allows us to become better at problem solving at the end of the day. It's a natural precursor to Virgo. It's all about the capacity to refine, improve things and come up with new solutions. We can't do that if we don't do the work of Leo, because it requires creativity to come up with solutions from a different paradigm. Because at the end of the day, as Einstein said, you can't solve a problem with the same level of consciousness that created it in the first place. We have to move to the next level. For that to happen, we have to stop pretending to be something that we're not. We have to stop identifying with the ego and the roles that we play in life, and instead learn to just be, to be connected with our hearts, to have love flowing unconditionally from us, to have that merciful spirit so we don't entertain any need to dominate other people or to have revenge when other people don't acknowledge us, because that just keeps us stuck in an old cycle of ego and keeps us trapped in the lower levels. If we want to experience true joy and true fulfillment in life, then we have to overcome that to be who we are, not who we think we are, and to celebrate when other people have reached that point where they're able to be who they are. They shine their light unconditionally, they're full of love, and want to share it with the world around us. And that's where we all should be aiming for, is that capacity to love ourselves and love one another, and to embrace the magic of life, embrace play, to enjoy life and share in the joy of creating in alignment with the higher plan, as it were. So that's the key area for us all to learn in Leo, is to it's not about operating from the ego anymore. It's about allowing the true self to shine forth, and that comes through being present. So the more we can spend time in meditation, just focusing on living in the present moment, the more easily we shine our light, and the more comfortable we are just being without stressing about the roles we should be playing. It's letting go of all those labels, letting go of all the roles that we play. It doesn't mean we stop doing anything in life. It doesn't mean we stop fulfilling the kind of roles that we play, as it were. We don't identify them. Our identity is not tied up with what we do. Our identity is based on our soul self, not the ego conditioning. Now, in terms of the aspects to the Sun during this period, so on the 23rd of August itself, of July, the Sun will be trine to Ceres. So this is a very kind of nurturing combination. It allows us to embrace that nurturing energy. Ceres is in Sagittarius, having recently turned direct, and it's about uniting the expansive consciousness, the desire to move forward, to expand our level of awareness of who we really are, and to nurture other people through embodying that radiant love and that desire to be the true self and not just living out our lives vicariously through the ego. On the 29th, the Sun will then trine to Chiron retrograde in Aries. So this aspect is an opportunity for us to recognise where there are still old wounds to the ego. Chiron is in Aries, which is Mars's realm, and this can affect our capacity to act, but only if we're still applying limiting self-definitions, because Aries is the I am, if you like, and is often focused on doing, whereas Leo ideally is about being. It's about radiating who we are and allowing our spirit or our creative energy flowing from us to make things manifest. Obviously requires action to be taken at the same time. With the Trine to Chiron, it's also about recognizing where we're still operating or where we're still basing our sense of identity on the ego, which allows us to entertain the sense that we're wounded in the first place, and instead remembering that we're not here to shine just for ourselves, we're here to shine for everyone. The more we share our lights and the more we illuminate or become illuminated from within through overcoming conditioning and living in the present moment and just letting our true self radiate love and light from within, which is our true nature, then our actions will be imbued by the same qualities, and we won't be worried about, are we able to do this, can we do that, or who am I, as it were. The true self is always operating from love, and if we can remember this and focus on shining for the benefit of all, not just who we think we are, then the world can become more illuminated and the light strengthens, and all the shadow stuff we're seeing manifest around us is naturally retreats from our lives in that respect. The following day the Sun is going to be square to Uranus in Taurus, so this aspect is about recognizing the need to see where our values are based on conditioning, based on ego still, and where we need to transform it through connection with the higher mind. So where we need to transform the way we value things and the way we base our decisions around the way we utilize resources. And it's also about transforming the sense of self from the ego to the higher mind. So one of the key challenges this highlights is our willingness to embrace change, our willingness to transform the sense of self through renewing the mind, through breaking the ego's conditioning, which is usually based on what we rate, the kind of values we raised by the society we grew up in. And it's recognizing that true values are universal. Values like love, values like justice, values like peace. It's about transforming our values to that level, and it's also separating or transforming our sense of how we value ourselves from what we have to what we can give, if you like, rather the spiritual essence we can radiate. So it's moving from the ego level to the soul level, and the capacity to create the resources which will allow us to build a new paradigm, and to do it in a way where we work together and recognise the fundamental oneness behind all life. Because if we do things just to, out of a sense of rebellion, or to make ourselves seem more unique, but at the same time not really exploring our true sense of self, then we waste that kind of opportunity to transform our values from the kind of materialistic to the spiritual, that then allows us to live our lives guided by a set of values that recognises the oneness with all life, and we remember to focus on these values at all times, and don't just use it as key buzzwords as we sometimes see in the world around us. We recognise that actually these are fundamental truths. It's up to us to embody them through transforming the sense of who we are and operating from the true self, and transforming the values that we live by so that they reflect the underlying oneness of all life, and reflect the understanding that helping other people by sharing that, or pooling our resources together, benefits humanity as a whole and not just the individual. On the 1st we'll have the new moon in Leo, so this is obviously an opportunity for us to look at setting, or it's the opportunity to bring the conscious and subconscious minds together and focus on setting new beginnings. I mean, this is something we can do every single day. We don't have to wait for new moons, but the new moon just happens to be a particularly potent opportunity for us to focus on elevating the level of consciousness we operate within Leo, from the need for kind of other people's approval and the need to play roles and to dominate other people, or to need other people's validation, or do things but with the expectation they do something back for us, and to instead operate from the higher levels of Leo, which is the capacity to give unconditionally, to radiate love unconditionally, and to have that spirit of mercy and benevolence, not the desire for domination or control or revenge if we don't get what we want. And it's also looking at overcome any fear of rejection, if you like, because rejection is a core fear of Leo. But if we love ourselves unconditionally, then it doesn't matter what other people think of us from that point. And in that point, rejection ceases to be an issue for us because we don't need other people's validation. We love ourselves enough to just be who we are. On the 7th, we'll have a trine between Sun and Jupiter. So this is the second trine of the current Sun-Jupiter cycle, and this is right towards the end of Jupiter retrograde. So about 3 days later, Jupiter will turn direct. So this trine is an opportunity for us to focus. We get a major burst of expansive energy, and it's important that we use this energy to develop greater self-understanding, to recognize the truth of who we really are, not just, and it's learning to overcome any beliefs that allow us to keep living a lie, and to instead understand that we are part of a collective whole. We're not separate from the world around us. And it's also about understanding the importance of following our own conscience, because it's our conscience. Sagittarius is about the natural laws, but at the psychological level, it's about having the discipline to live in accordance with what our conscience guides us, not what will bring us social acceptance or allow us to fit in. So it's about the challenge of honouring our own conscience and doing things that allow us to live in alignment with our core ethics or our core moral compass. We don't go against what our conscience tells us. We don't do things against natural laws, and we also don't engage in that tribal mentality or that us versus them and that judgmentalism that can come from the lower level of Sagittarius if we're operating from the ego. It's separating identity from the philosophies or belief systems that we're raised in, and it's understanding or developing that self-understanding and recognising that we're part of a collective whole. We need to broaden our minds beyond the current level, and we must be willing to live by a higher ordeal. It doesn't necessarily mean that and it's also important that we don't embrace any kind of superiority complex in the process. It's about understanding the or universal ideals that underpin any healthy society, and seek to live them out in our own lives without judging other people in the process. It's about having that humility to recognise that we're part of something greater than ourselves. It's greater than the individual, it's greater than the person, and we have to humble ourselves and allow that higher understanding or that natural guidance that comes when we live in divine flow and we operate from the intuitive side rather than from the ideologies that we're raised upon. So it's about operating from our intuition that comes from the core self, and operating from the higher understanding that we're part of something greater than ourselves, and to think otherwise is delusional and inevitably lead to karma just to try and wake us up from those particular illusions of the ego. The following day, the Sun will be in conjunct to Saturn, and also semi-sextile North Node. So this is about understanding the importance of discipline and responsibility in our lives. And by responsibility, I'm not talking about fulfilling duties and stuff like that. It's about the ability to respond to situations around us with integrity, to respond, not react, and to choose consciously to respond to situations from wisdom, and to kind of take that moment to step back, to make sure that we don't react from the ego, that we respond from the soul. And it's about having that capacity to have that complete self-control where we're in control of the ego. We're not bound, we're not subject to or not pulled off center by its programming and its desire to have its own needs met rather than the needs of the soul. And it's about that capacity to stay committed to the path, to have the faith or maintain the faith in the face of obstacles. And it's about taking that step back, observing what's going on in front of us, and then responding from wisdom rather than reacting from ego and seeing the other person as an adversary, as opposed to someone who might actually be there to teach us where there's an internal obstacle that we haven't dealt with, so that person at some level has agreed to reflect it to us externally in order for us to learn from it. And obviously with the semi-sextile to the north node, which means it's in conjunct with the south node, this is an aspect about recognising the need to let go of the old south node tendencies. It's about the spiritual alchemy of transforming old habits of doing things to try out of a need to get respect from other people, to do it from social approval. It's about transforming, recognising the need to only take responsibility for our own stuff. It's not about trying to take control over other people's lives. That creates harm for ourselves. And instead it's about reconnecting with the core of our being. It's about that humility and empathy towards other people. It's about recognising the need to build our own foundations that will allow us to fulfil the goals that we want to create for ourselves, rather than doing what will bring social acceptance. So it's about letting go or overcoming the part of ourselves that gets seduced by glamour, gets seduced by public acclaim, as it were, and instead remembering the importance of the old adage of to thine own self be true. On the 11th, the Sun will be in conjunct Neptune in Pisces, so this aspect is about the need to, this is in effect is actually the natural relationship because between the Sun and Neptune. The Sun is in his home sign of Leo, Neptune is in his home sign of Pisces, so these two in their natural rulerships are in conjunct anyway. So the in conjunct, which is an aspect which is like trying to mix oil and water, is all about spiritual alchemy. The Sun at the lower level is about the ego, so it's the capacity to interact and have that gravitas, if you like. But Neptune is about that selflessness, that egoless state, which we experience when we're operating from the true self. So it's about bring these two facets together. It's about allowing ourselves to be psychically open. It's about allowing ourselves to be open to receiving unconditional love, of recognising that we're connected to a higher power, whether you want to call it God, the universe, whatever term you feel most comfortable with. But it's about the capacity to surrender the old, to dissolve who we think we are, and that enables us to shine who we really are, to radiate that unconditional love, that compassionate energy that is healing to people around us. But it's not about trying to save other people in the process. It's the capacity to simply be, to radiate unconditional love, to feel that compassion for humanity and to extend it to other people as and when they need it, but not trying to save them. It's about respecting the other person's need to go through what they're going through in order to help them transform or to grow as an individual, or in order to learn and awaken. So sometimes it will be about stepping back, sometimes it's about stepping forward and helping out, but it's recognising or listening to wisdom and recognising when we need to step in and radiate that kind of love and offer help, and when we need to step back and allow people to go through what they're going through in order to learn. So generally speaking, it's better off to really only help if the person has actually asked us for it, because then the person wants it, and whatever we do then to help them from a place of love will most likely be received easily, as opposed to trying to jump in with the idea that we're helping, and instead we could actually be doing more harm and preventing the person from learning something now, that if they then have to learn it through a harder lesson later on. On the 14th, the Sun will be in conjunct Pluto, and this aspect is all about the importance of transforming the shadow, of recognizing where we're still driven by deep unconscious desires, and especially desires based in the shadow, and where we still have an unconscious desire to either express or seek power over our environment, or where we still cling to victimhood to avoid taking responsibility for empowering ourselves. But at the higher level, it's an opportunity to embrace shadow qualities, to incorporate them into our being so we achieve a greater wholeness. And it's about radiating that authentic power that only comes from truth and needs to be tempered with love in order for it to be at its highest level, which is the phoenix level, if you like, where our love isn't just about ourselves or the way we empower ourselves, also empowers other people by virtue of the energy we radiate. On the same day, the Sun is going to conjunct Venus. Venus is behind the Sun at this time, so she won't be visible at all. But this gives us an opportunity to try and embody the Venus traits, the capacity for loving relationships, the illuminating the values that we live by, so we make sure that we are radiating love, that we bring love and compassion to our relationships. And it's about seeking connection with one another that is authentic. So it's making sure that the relationships that we forge with the people, or the way we connect with people, fosters authenticity and allows us to be who we really are, and to love one another as we are. And it's also about illuminating the values, so shining a light on the values that we've been living by. And obviously, if some of them don't recognise or don't allow us to live with the truth of oneness, then we have to let go of it. So this is an opportunity to illuminate that part of ourselves, to illuminate the inner feminine energies, the part of ourselves that allows us to connect with other people and build bridges, to create an atmosphere of peace and harmony, and allows us to forge relationships with one another. So it's the part of us that seeks that connection, because at the end of the day, human beings are social beings at some level. Obviously we need time alone at times, but ultimately we need that capacity to connect with one another, and in a loving way at the same time. The day after, so on the 15th, we'll have a full moon in Aquarius. So this is an opportunity to balance the need to be our authentic selves, to radiate our own connection with the creative energies outwards. With the moon in Aquarius, though, it reminds us that we're not just an individual, we're part of a collective whole. And if we focus on shining our light and sharing it with the communities that we're part of, then our communities benefit. But it's also making sure that we stay true to who we are. So it's very important that we don't allow any pressure to conform to a group to stop us from shining our light. If that pressure exists, then maybe it's not really the group that's going to be in our best interest, as it were. But if we are working with groups that focus on empowerment and focus on each person being able to shine their own light, then we grow as groups. The light of the collective becomes greater through us sharing our light and love for one another, of merging it together to create a much greater love and light than is possible for an individual on their own. And it's recognising that the fact that we are all interconnected, so doing anything where we seek to shine our light at the expense of other people goes against that and inherently limits what we can really achieve. Whereas if we recognise our underlying oneness and that the power of enlightening community, where each person is encouraged to shine their unique self in its full glory, and to be their authentic self in alignment with God, when we come together, empowered communities can form where each person achieves their maximum, or achieves their full self-realization, as it were, and the group becomes stronger without any traps of conformity coming in. And on the same day, the Sun will be square to Vesta, so this particular aspect can highlight a challenge between the need to express our own individual self versus the commitments that we focus on. So it's about learning to recognise the need for a coherent focus in life and make sure that we have a clear vision, that we stay committed to being true to who we are. And it's about the capacity to stay commit to a path that brings fulfillment, allows us to be our authentic self, and allows us to maintain that personal integrity where we can achieve fulfillment. We're not experiencing clash between what we want to do and our commitments to society as a whole. It's more about bringing the two into alignment, so focus on how we can fulfill our commitments or our responsibilities within the groups or within relationships that we have without undermining our own personal integrity. And the last set of aspects will be on the 22nd. So this is the Sun will be conjunct Juno and sextile Pallas Athena. So these aspects bring about potentially a strong focus on our most committed relationships, because Juno is a soulmate asteroid. So these are the relationships that allow us to potentially foster a soul connection with one another as opposed to just casual acquaintances. So these are the deep soulful relationships we want to build. And with this conjunction with the Sun, it's an opportunity to focus on embracing that part of ourselves that allows us to kind of merge with the people or have that soulful connection or that soulful union. This doesn't necessarily have to be romantic relationships. This can also be very close friendships that go much deeper than a casual acquaintance. Both people are authentic with one another. And it can also be the relationship between a teacher and a student, if you like, in kind of the spiritual sense as opposed to modern education. And as I mentioned before, there's also a sextile to Pallas Athena on the same day. So this is about the capacity to channel that creative energy, because Pallas Athena is about breaking down old paradigms to unleash that creative energy and making sure that it's a transformation through just in a way that's just honest and allows us to adhere to the wisdom of balance, where we balance the different polarities within us so we become whole and balanced within, and then radiate that to other people. So there's a lot to take on board there. So this is a particularly long video, but the most important thing we can remember during the Sun's transit through Leo is to move beyond the ego's need for validation and approval, where we're living behind masks and playing roles in society but we still don't actually have a clue who we are. And instead it's taking that step back to be present and allow the light of our true self to radiate outwards, to uplift people through the presence that we embody, and to overcome any need for other people's validation or other people's approval, as it were. It's letting go of the fear of rejection, because if we're living aligned with our true self and connected to God, that's a connection that only we ourselves can lose, as it were. So it's not something that anyone can take away from us. And if we have that level of connection, that spiritual devotion and that commitment to be our authentic selves, what other people say or think about us no longer matters, and the people who are doing the same as us are seeking to radiate their true self through letting go or dissolving the old sense of self, dissolving the ego structures, dissolving the need for approval, and instead just loving ourselves unconditionally and allowing that love to flow outwards and radiate that light and joy of being. Then as a whole we grow, we become more illuminated from within, we become empowered to be our best selves, and we work in alignment with divine. We become co-creators rather than just creating something in order to gain validation or get other people's approval. Instead we co-create with divine, with God, with the universal consciousness, whatever you feel most comfortable with, and from there we can open ourselves up to the magic of life, to embrace the joy of being, to embrace the magic of day to day that we often forget about it or overlook because we get so bogged down in conditioning. But when we take that step back and allow spirit to guide us instead, then life can become magical, and any needs that we have can be met in magical ways, and ways that we could never have dreamt of as an ego. But the soul, being connected to God, can see it and can channel it, as it were. So may the Sun's transit through Leo bring you many new insights and opportunity to dissolve the old person and instead become who you really are, and live in that place of joy, of authentic being, and to be that presence in life, to radiate the presence of our true self rather than living behind the mask of who we think we are. So may the Sun's transit through Leo bring you many blessings. Take care.